mining tunnels groaned like an old beast beneath the crushing weight of the mountain. Ren Solis's gloves were slick with rock dust as she guided the drill's teeth into the last seam of the shift. The air was thick, the only sound the rhythmic churn of the drill and her own steady breathing, until the console beside her screamed in warning. "Ah! Alert! G.O. Pressure spike." The numbers weren't climbing. They were leaping, each spike higher than the last. The stomach tightened. Pressure didn't just jump like that unless something deep below was moving. Before she could pull back, a low, resonant crack split the air. The tunnel ceiling trembled. Chunks of rock rained down. Then the mountain roared. The trusses overhead snapped like brittle bones. A boulder the size of a cargo hauler tore loose and slammed into the track, crushing 2 miners instantly. Their screams were gone before the dust rose. Rin threw herself against the wall, feeling the shock rattle her spine. When the dust began to settle, she realized she was the only one still breathing. She reached for her comm, coughing. "Control, this is Solace Tunnel 6 just." The ground jolted under her boots, cutting her off. A section of the wall peeled away, revealing something that shouldn't have been there. Not rock, not ore. It was a crystal towering, faceted, glowing from within like the slow, steady pulse of a giant's heart. Veins of light crawled across its surface, flowing in rhythm. A comm crackled. "Rin, get out now!" The shift manager's voice barked, tight with panic. "We're picking up seismic patterns. This isn't natural." She stared at the crystal. "It's calling to me. Rin, I'm ordering you." She cut him off, not by choice, but because something inside her chest seemed to answer the crystal's rhythm. It wasn't sound. It was sensation, a deep vibration in her bones, resonating with the pulse in front of her. Without thinking, she reached out. Her fingertips brushed the surface. The crystal's light flared violently, washing the tunnel in blinding white. The ground convulsed. Chunks of stone blew outward, not falling, but exploding, as if the rock itself had been shoved from within. The blast threw her back, slamming her against the far wall. Her vision fractured into shards of impossible images. She was no longer in the tunnel, but soaring above a world torn apart. Alien warships, black and jagged, pierced the skies of shattered cities. Oceans boiled, continents cracked and slid into the sea. She saw the world die. A voice, not human, cut through the chaos. It was deep, layered, and it spoke inside her head. "You will be the heartbeat of the earth, or its grave." Her knees buckled. She caught herself against the tunnel wall, gasping. The glow of the crystal had dimmed, but the pulse she'd felt was now inside her. Her own heartbeat seemed wrong, heavier, as if the weight of the mountain now lived in her chest. Then came the sound. It was faint at first, a distant metallic whine beneath the settling rumble of the tunnel. But it was growing, echoing through the stone. She turned toward it, squinting through the haze. From the rubble where the crystal had broken free, something metallic pushed upward. It wasn't smooth like human machinery. It was angular, alien, coated in layers of mineral that cracked and fell away as it rose. The edges gleamed with an oily sheen that shimmered in the crystal's fading light. She realized with a cold twist in her gut it wasn't being unearthed. It had been here, long before any human drill, buried, waiting. Her comm hissed again, the manager's voice breaking through. "Rin, the tunnel sensors are pegging what's happening in there. Your vitals are. Damn it. You're spiking like you're—" She swallowed hard, eyes locked on the alien device. "It's not just the mountain. Something else is waking up." The thing shifted, a slow, deliberate movement, as though aware it was being watched. She took an involuntary step back, her boot crunching over shattered stone. The pulse inside her chest answered with a sharp, jarring beat, too fast, too strong. A thin seam along the object's surface split open. Light leaked from within, the same deep blue-white glow as the crystal. Rin's mind flashed with the image of alien ships again, and she knew, without knowing how, that the crystal and this machine were connected. The tunnel shuddered. The air was thickening, heat rising from the ground itself. Her comm roared with overlapping voices. "Pressure readings are redlining. You've got to move." But the way back had vanished. At some point during the chaos, the tunnel behind her had collapsed completely, sealing her inside with the crystal and the machine. She stepped toward the device. The glow brightened as she did, its light stroking the walls like searching fingers. Somewhere in the stone around her, she thought she heard movement. Not the random shift of settling debris, but a steady, methodical scrape. The voice in her head returned, lower now, almost coaxing. "Choose, heartbeat. Break the stone for them, or bury them all." Her breath quickened. The meaning was clear, even if she didn't want to believe it. The crystal wasn't just a piece of alien tech. It was alive in some way, and it had chosen her. And the thing rising from the dirt wasn't here to help. Another rumble shook the ground, harder this time. She could feel the vibrations up her legs, through her spine, right into the base of her skull. For a moment, her vision swam, her mind splitting between two worlds, the claustrophobic dark of the tunnel, and a bird's-eye view of the entire mountain as something vast stirred beneath it. Her comm went silent. Not cut, just gone. No static, no signal. The machine's glow flared once, then steadied like an eye opening fully. She realized she wasn't trapped in a cave-in. She was standing inside something's cradle, and it was about to hatch. Ryan woke to the antiseptic sting of recycled air and the steady beep of the med bay monitor. The ceiling above her was a dull panel of steel, the same as every other surface in Bastion 3, yet the sound that filled her ears wasn't mechanical. Beneath the hum of life support, she could hear it, a deep, slow rumble, as though the mountain itself were breathing. Her bones vibrated with it. Her blood seemed to pulse in time with something vast and unseen below. Her heartbeat was no longer her own. It was locked to that subterranean rhythm. She pushed herself up, wincing at the soreness along her ribs. Her memories were fractured images, the crystal's blinding light, the alien device emerging from the rubble, the voice in her head. Now, even here in the med bay, she could still feel the faint echo of that voice curling through her skull like smoke. The door hissed open, and Chief Med Officer Lantry stepped in, his expression caught between concern and suspicion. You were found unconscious in Tunnel 6, 2, dead. Collapsed section behind you. You want to tell me how you walked out with only bruises? Rin met his gaze, but said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence was safer than answers. Her past was full of lessons like that. The first alien assault on Earth had taken her family in a single night. Her mother. Little brother. Her father's voice cut off mid-sentence over a comm link. She'd fled with the second wave of evacuees, ending up on this barren mining world where the last pockets of humanity scraped together a living under alien shadow. Bastion 3 was more than a shelter. It was a coffin buried under rock, waiting for the day it was dug up. She'd survived here by keeping her head down, working the dangerous jobs others avoided, and never letting anyone too close. Friendships were luxuries. People in Bastion 3 couldn't afford attachments only made. The inevitable loss worse. Now she had something else to hide. When Lantry finally left, muttering about a mandatory psych evaluation, Rin swung her legs off the bed. The rumble under her skin hadn't stopped. If anything, it had sharpened. Every step she took, she could feel the give of the floor, the subtle tension of stone behind the steel plating. It was more than awareness. It was control. On an impulse, she placed her palm against the wall and focused. The vibration shifted. The metal beneath her hand gave a faint shiver, as though reacting to her thought. Somewhere far below, she felt a rock seam crack. Her breath caught. This was impossible, yet she'd done it as easily as flexing a muscle. And with that came something darker, a whisper from the depths, curling up through the stone, threading into her mind. They will kill you before you kill them. She jerked her hand back. The voice was neither male nor female, not entirely human, and it carried a cold amusement, as if it already knew what she would become. She stepped out into the main corridor of Bastion 3. Miners in dust-streaked gear shuffled past, their faces hollow with exhaustion. The air was always tinged with the acrid smell of machinery, the walls sweating condensation from the heat exchangers. Overhead, the PA crackled to life. All personnel report to assigned sectors. Incoming fleet detected. Impact in 36 hours. The words stopped her mid-stride. She looked up toward the nearest display screen mounted in the wall. The tactical feed showed the black void above their world, speckled with the unmistakable silhouettes of alien warships dropping into lower orbit. Her stomach tightened. She'd seen no shapes before. In the vision, the crystal had burned into her mind. Only now they were real, not some psychic hallucination. 36 hours, she murmured. A passing miner glanced at her. What? Nothing! She moved on quickly, keeping her head down, though her mind was racing. She could feel faint tremors in the ground already, subtle, measured, like footsteps of something enormous far away. The aliens were moving toward them even before they landed. In the control hub, she paused at the doorway. The room was a hive of activity, techs shouting over each other, data streams flickering across consoles, the scent of fear sharp in the recycled air. Commander Varric was at the center, barking orders. Shut down the west tunnels, divert power to shield capacitors, and someone find out why our seismic monitors are spiking before they even hit the surface. Rin lingered at the threshold. She knew why. She could feel the alien presence pressing against the edges of her perception, probing through the bedrock like fingers searching for a pulse. Varric's eyes caught hers. "Solace, you're supposed to be in med bay." "I'm fine," she said evenly. "You're not cleared for duty." "I'm not here for duty. I'm here to warn you. They're already under us." The room stilled. Varric's brow furrowed. "You got evidence of that? I can feel them," she said before she could stop herself. The reaction was immediate raised eyebrows, skeptical glances. A tech muttered. "What, you're a walking seismograph now?" Ryan's jaw tightened. "Believe me or don't, but if you wait until you see them, it'll be too late." Varric's gaze hardened. "Get back to med bay." The whisper in her head returned, cold and smug. "Toad!" "They do not listen. Make them." She turned on her heel and walked out, ignoring the stares that followed her. If they wouldn't listen, she'd act alone. She always had. The corridor seemed narrower as she descended into the older sections of Bastion 3, where the air was warmer, the lights dimmer, and the sound of the mountain was louder. She could sense every fault line, every unstable pocket of stone, as though the earth's skeleton had been laid bare in her mind. The power both exhilarated and frightened her. She stopped at an abandoned maintenance shaft and laid her hand against the bulkhead. Closing her eyes, she let the rumble in her bones sink with the rhythm in the stone. The world shifted. She wasn't just hearing the mountain now. She was inside it, her awareness flowing through cracks and caverns. And then she felt them. They were deep, but moving closer, their progress methodical. Machines drilled through rock with a precision no human team could match, the vibrations sharp and unnatural. She could trace their path straight toward Bastion 3's primary oxygen vault. Her eyes snapped open. The oxygen vault was the station's lifeblood. If the aliens breached it, they wouldn't need to fire a shot. Everyone inside would suffocate within hours. She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to act immediately. But the voice returned, almost coaxing now. "You can stop them. Break the stone. Let it fall." Her pulse pounded. This was what the crystal had done to her. It had made her a weapon, and the question she couldn't escape was whether she was still the one holding the trigger. 36 hours. That was the official countdown. But from the feel of the earth under her feet, Rin knew the real clock was ticking much faster. The first sign came with a faint quiver under Rin's boots, so subtle she might have mistaken it for the hum of Bastion 3's generators. But it wasn't mechanical. It was too sharp, too deliberate, a bite into the stone itself. She froze in the corridor, closing her eyes to let the vibration roll up her legs, through her ribs, into the back of her skull. She could feel the pattern, the rhythm of impact after impact, as if someone were driving a massive drill into the mountain's bones. By the time she reached the control hub, the tremors had grown stronger. On the screens, seismic graphs jittered with erratic spikes. Technicians shouted over one another, cycling through data feeds. "They're not coming from above," one muttered, pointing at the readings. "These are lateral, deep lateral." Rin stepped forward, eyes fixed on the shifting red lines. "They're drilling," she said, "straight toward us." Commander Varric turned from the central console, his expression tight. "We expected orbital bombardment, not." "They're under our feet," Rin cut in. "I can hear them." Varric frowned. "Hear them?" She met his gaze. "They're close enough to taste in the rock, and they're heading for the oxygen vault. If they breach it, everyone in here is dead in hours." The room went silent for a beat, then Varric's mouth twitched into something between irritation and disbelief. "You expect me to reroute defense operations based on a hunch?" "It's not a hunch," she snapped. "It's the stone talking to me." One of the techs chuckled under his breath. "What are you, a geological prophet now?" Varric's voice turned cold. "Leave the control hub, Salas. You're not on shift, and you're not cleared for this discussion." Her jaw clenched. "You don't have time for your protocols. They'll be here before you even." "That's an order." The whisper in her head coiled tight and sharp. "They will not act. You must." Rin turned on her heel, the metallic tang of frustration on her tongue. She knew Varric wasn't going to move until it was too late, and by then there'd be nothing left to save. She made her way down through the older maintenance shafts, where the walls were bare rock instead of steel, the air warmer and damp from the slow seep of groundwater. Down here, the vibrations were clearer, each one a thud into her bones. She could almost map their approach in her head, alien drills slicing in a perfect line toward the vault. She reached a section of abandoned tunnel sealed years ago after a collapse. Ducking under a sagging support beam, she stepped into the darkness, her helmet lamp casting jagged shadows over the walls. This was close enough. Rin pressed her palms against the rock and shut her eyes. The pulse inside her chest deepened, syncing with the mountain's heartbeat. She felt every fracture, every brittle seam ready to give. "Break it," the voice urged. "Close their path." Her fingers curled against the stone. The vibration from the drills was louder now, an impatient gnawing in the earth. She pictured the rock folding in on itself, crushing the tunnel ahead. The ground responded. A low groan rolled through the darkness, building into a thunderous crack. The floor heaved under her boots as stone sheared and tumbled in the unseen deep. The drilling stopped abruptly, swallowed by the sound of collapsing rock. She staggered back, heart pounding, not from the effort but from the rush of knowing she had stopped them, at least for now. Then she heard something else, a new tremor, deeper than the first, rising from the opposite direction. This one wasn't hers. It was heavier, denser, carrying a resonance that made her teeth ache. She felt it slide through the rock like a blade, smooth and deliberate. Her stomach tightened. This wasn't just counter-drilling, it was control. The same way she could command the stone. Someone or something else was doing it too, and it was coming toward her. The voice in her head was silent now, replaced by the alien rhythm threading through the earth. She could almost feel it searching, following the echo of her collapse, tracing it back to its source. They knew she was here. She pulled her hands from the wall and stepped back into the dim tunnel, forcing her breathing steady. Her interference had bought Bastion 3 time, but it had also revealed her. Somewhere in the dark beneath the mountain, something was moving with purpose. Not just toward the oxygen vault, toward her. The first pulse hit like a hammer to the chest. Rin staggered against the corridor wall, gripping the steel plating as the vibration tore through her ribs and into her spine. This wasn't the slow, steady beat of the mountain she'd grown used to hearing in her bones. This was an invasive rhythm, a brutal staccato that felt like it was trying to wrench her heartbeat into its own tempo. Somewhere above, machinery screamed as metal strained. Lights flickered along the ceiling of Bastion 3. The alarms followed seconds later, a shrill wail that couldn't mask the deeper, more relentless thrum beneath. In the control hub, Commander Varick's voice boomed over the comm. Seismic resonances detected at all lower levels. Unknown source. Brace for structural stress. Rin didn't need a scanner to know where it was coming from. She could feel it, each pulse radiating outward from a single point in the southern range where the rock was hollow and angry. The aliens had planted a seismic resonator, a machine that could shatter Bastion 3 from the bedrock up. Another pulse struck, harder this time. Her knees buckled. It was as if the machine were inside her, clamping down on her heart and forcing it to beat to its mechanical will. She clenched her teeth, forcing air into her lungs. The voice in her head was quiet, but she could sense its attention, like it was waiting to see what she would do. She didn't wait for orders. Orders hadn't saved anyone yet. The lower corridors reeked of rust and damp stone as she descended into the old mining sector. These tunnels had been abandoned after the first alien skirmishes, when workers went missing and patrols came back reporting shapes in the dark. The path to the resonator lay straight through it. Whoa! By the time she reached the first collapsed shaft, she could already smell them. Not a natural scent. Oily, metallic, with a faint sharpness like scorched air. Her lamp caught a smear of something on the wall, dark and iridescent. Not blood. Not human, anyway. The next pulse came, and she had to press her palm to the wall to stay upright. In the stone beneath, she could feel the machine's heartbeat, a cold and unyielding counter to her own. It was deeper now, closer. She slipped between twisted support beams, boots crunching over gravel. Her breathing was steady, but her pulse was ragged, fighting against the alien tempo. She pushed harder, the tunnels narrowing, the walls pressing in until the darkness ahead glowed faintly blue. The light wasn't from her lamp. She stepped into a wider chamber and froze. At the far end, surrounded by jagged stalagmites of raw ore, stood the seismic resonator, a monstrous assembly of black alloy, its surface crawling with pale energy. Each pulse of light through its coils sent a tremor shivering through the floor, up her legs, into her chest, and between her and the machine stood a figure. It was tall, its limbs too long, armor fused with its skin so seamlessly it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Its head was crowned with jagged spines, eyes burning with the same sickly blue as the resonator. When it spoke, its voice was a layered echo, as if more than one being spoke through the same mouth. "The crystal in you is ours," it said. "It does not belong to your kind." Ryan's hand drifted toward the haft of her mining pick, but her voice was steady. "Maybe, but now it's a part of me." The alien tilted its head, studying her like an insect pinned for inspection. "You cannot wield it. It will wield you." The next pulse struck, stronger than before. Pain lanced through her chest. She felt the crystal inside her respond, not resisting the alien rhythm, but harmonizing with it, like two notes colliding into one destructive chord. Her vision blurred. The wall seemed to flex and breathe. The alien moved. It was faster than it looked, closing the distance with a predator's grace. She swung the pick, metal screeching against armor. Sparks danced in the blue glow, and the alien's clawed hand lashed out, raking across her arm. She felt the crystal flare inside her, sending heat up her spine. Her knees buckled, but the heat didn't fade. It spread. The stone under her feet began to tremble, not from the machine, but from her. The alien hesitated, its eyes narrowing. "Yaw!" it started. Rin slammed her palm into the ground. The tremor surged outward like a wave, knocking the alien back into a cluster of stalagmites. Shards of rock rained down, splintering across its armor. She pushed forward, every step in rhythm with the pounding in her chest. The crystal's energy roared through her veins. She could feel every fracture in the rock, every fault line waiting to split. The resonator pulsed again, but this time the impact fed into her instead of crushing her. She threw her will into the earth. A deep, wrenching crack split the chamber floor. The fissure widened with a deafening roar, racing toward the resonator. The alien lunged for her, claws outstretched, but the ground gave way beneath it, swallowing it into the darkness below. The fissure reached the machine. The resonator tilted, its supports snapping. Then the entire assembly plunged into the chasm, vanishing into the shadows. The chamber shuddered as the tremors ceased, the alien heartbeat finally silenced. Rin dropped to one knee, gasping. The crystal's glow inside her dimmed, but it didn't leave. Her hands shook, not from exhaustion, but from the sudden, terrifying realization that she hadn't been entirely in control. In that moment of final collapse, she had seen something. Two visions laid over each other. In one, Bastion 3 stood, its people alive, the mountain holding firm. In the other, the bunker lay in ruins, buried under a deliberate quake of her own making. She wasn't sure which vision belonged to her and which belonged to the voice inside her head. It came again, low and certain. One choice saves them. One ends them. You will not be the one to decide. Her stomach turned cold. She staggered to her feet, forcing her breathing steady. The fissure had sealed partially, rubble shifting into place as the mountain settled. The alien was gone, the resonator destroyed, but the echo of its presence still clung to the air. As she turned toward the tunnel, the silence pressed in. No alarms, no pulses, just the deep, steady beat of the earth in her chest, hers and not hers. She knew the fight wasn't over. They'd send more machines, more commanders. And every time she faced them, the crystal inside her would take a little more. The question was no longer whether she could use it to protect Bastion 3. It was whether she could keep it from deciding that the best way to protect the Earth was to bury everything. The siege began with silence. No more distant drilling, no seismic pulses from hidden machines. Just the still, heavy air of the mountain holding its breath. Rin stood in the observation bay, staring at the grainy feed from the surface. The alien horde had formed a black ring around the upper slopes, their ships positioned like watchful predators. Through the snow-dusted wind, she saw the shapes being lowered from their landers, cylindrical devices the size of cargo. Haulers, their surfaces etched with geometric lines that glowed faintly red. Commander Varric's voice came over the comm, flat and grim. Geothermal absorption warheads. Once they're deep enough, they'll detonate, bleed the mountain dry, and cook us where we stand. Rin didn't need the explanation. The vibrations had started again, subtle, methodical. The devices were boring into the heart of the mountain, seeking the geothermal vents that powered Bastion 3. Once the core heat was released in a controlled burn, the entire complex would become an oven. In the command chamber, she listened to the tactical reports stacking up. The defensive turrets on the surface were gone, picked apart by precision strikes. The outer sensor net had been burned away. There was no line left to hold but the stone itself. Varric leaned on the central table, his eyes scanning the hollow 3D map of the mountain. We can't breach their perimeter. We can't disarm the warheads. We don't have a choice anymore. His gaze shifted to her. It's you or nothing. She didn't answer immediately. The thought of unleashing what she had been holding back all this time was like staring down a cliff. She could feel the crystal inside her stir at the mere possibility, its rhythm already sinking to the subtle tremors from the alien devices. It wanted this, she finally said. If I do this, we might all die. Varric's voice didn't waver. If you don't, we will die. That was when the other voice slid into her thoughts, smooth as oil through stone. Let us do it. We will protect you, in our way. She closed her eyes. I don't trust your way, she thought back. Trust is not required. Only acceptance. The map in front of her glowed red at a dozen points, each one marking a warhead. She felt their positions without looking. They were like hot coals in the dark, pressing into her awareness. If she struck the mountain just right, she could trigger a chain reaction, collapse the surface, swallow the entire alien force in an avalanche of stone and fire. But she couldn't calculate exactly how deep the collapse would run. Bastion 3 might not survive. The comms crackled with new reports. Warheads at penetration depth. 30 seconds to ignition sequence. Varric's eyes locked with hers. Rin, now or never. The crystal's pulse quickened, and with it, her own. She left the command chamber without another word, heading for the heart of the mountain, the central shaft. A cavernous hollow, lined with ancient support struts and thick conduits carrying heat and power through the entire base. It was the one place where the mountain's energy was rawest, where she could reach the deepest strata without resistance. When she stepped onto the central platform, the air was hot and dry, thick with the scent of mineral dust. The vibrations from the alien devices were stronger here, like drum beats against her ribs. She moved to the edge, knelt, and pressed both palms to the stone. The voice in her head whispered again, "Open yourself. Let us flow." She hesitated only a heartbeat before forcing herself to breathe in slow and deep, letting the mountain's rhythm flood through her. Her vision blurred, then sharpened into something inhuman. She could see the strata of rock beneath her feet, the glowing threads of molten heat winding through the dark, the sharp red spikes where the alien warheads bored into the earth. And then she felt the surface above, the weight of the alien army, their machines, their ships perched like carrion birds on the slope. She could almost hear their engines cycling, smell the cold metallic tang of their armor. Varric's voice echoed faintly over the comm in her ear. "Do it, Solace!" Her eyes snapped open, glowing with the same cold light as the crystal. She reached deeper, beyond the familiar pull of her own muscles, into the vast and patient power of the stone itself. The mountain trembled in answer. The alien devices began their final ignition sequence. She could feel the sharp, accelerating pulses they sent into the ground, designed to crack the vents. She caught those pulses, held them, and turned them back. The first shockwave ripped up through the central shaft, rattling the platform under her knees. She pushed harder, feeding the quake with her own heartbeat. The walls groaned, deep fissures snapping through the bedrock. The warheads exploded prematurely, but not as the aliens intended. The energy they unleashed was dragged downward, pulled into the fracture she had opened. The molten core surged upward through the cracks, superheated gas and rock churning like a living thing. Above, the ground split open. Rin could feel it as if she stood on the surface, the crust tearing apart, the alien army stumbling as the earth convulsed beneath them. She poured everything into the quake. The crystal inside her roared, heat flooding her limbs until her skin felt like it was splitting. The mountain heaved and the fissures widened into gaping wounds. Alien ships slid into the chasms, swallowed whole. Machines shattered against collapsing ridges. The sky above the surface turned black with dust and ash. Her mind filled with two visions again, one where the collapse stopped just shy of Bastion 3, leaving the bunker battered but alive, the other where the quake surged too far, the roof of the bunker caving in under a wave of molten rock. She couldn't tell which was real, and the voice in her head was silent now, as if content to let her choose or to let chance decide. She pushed one final time, a scream tearing from her throat as the mountain's full weight shifted. The alien presence above was snuffed out in an instant, erased from her senses. Then the quake stopped. She collapsed onto her side, gasping, the glow fading from her eyes. The heat in her veins cooled, leaving only exhaustion and a hollow ache where the crystal's power had been moments ago. Silence followed, broken only by the groan of settling stone. "Oh!" The comm crackled with static, then Varric's voice came through, rough but alive. "Surface, clear. You did it." She rolled onto her back, staring at the ceiling far above. Dust drifted down like snow. Somewhere deep inside, the crystal's pulse stirred again, faint but steady. Rin closed her eyes, unsure whether she had just saved Bastion 3 or merely delayed its burial. The dust hadn't settled when the screams began. Rin stood in the dim emergency lights of the central shaft, her legs trembling, the taste of ash sharp in her mouth. Somewhere far above, the mountain was still groaning, small aftershocks shivering through the stone. The alien presence was gone. She could feel that absence as clearly as she'd once felt their drilling, but to silence it, left behind, was not victory. It was a hollow, heavy thing. When the reports started coming in, her chest tightened. The surface feed confirmed it. The alien fleet had been swallowed whole, their war machines buried under a tide of molten rock and collapsing ridges. But Bastion 3 hadn't escaped unscathed. A full section of the western wing was gone, caved in under the force of the quake. Nearly a third of the station's population was dead. Miners, engineers, children. She had known this risk. She had taken it anyway. By the time she staggered back into the hab levels, the survivors had gathered in the corridors, their faces gray in the flickering lights. Some stared at her with open gratitude. Others looked away as though the sight of her was too much to bear. The whispers started before she even reached her quarters. She saved us. She killed them, too. It was the aliens or us. She chose us. She chose for us. Her muscles ached as if she'd been carrying the mountain on her back. The crystal inside her was quiet now, but she could still feel its pulse faintly, buried deep in her bones. It was like standing near a sleeping predator. You couldn't see its teeth, but you knew they were there. Later, in the med bay, Varric stopped by. He was still in his armor, dust streaking his face. "You did what you had to," he said simply. She met his gaze. "That doesn't mean I wanted to." He didn't argue. He just nodded and left her with the silence. That night, she warped the damaged corridors, stepping over cracked flooring and past sealed bulkheads that would never open again. The air was stale here, thinner without the full oxygen flow. She traced her fingers along the walls, feeling the scars she'd left in the mountain. Every fracture in the stone felt like one in herself. In the dim glow of a maintenance lamp, a group of children sat huddled together. All of them! A boy no older than 8 looked up at her with wide, solemn eyes. "Is it true?" he asked. Rin crouched beside him. "Is what true? That you shook the earth so hard it swallowed the monsters?" She hesitated, then nodded once. "Yes." Another child, a girl with tangled hair, leaned forward. "Will you do it again? Will you make the ground save us next time, too?" Her throat tightened. She wanted to tell them she would, that she'd always keep them safe, but the truth pressed heavier than the mountain above. "Only if there's no other way," she said quietly. The boy frowned. "Why not every time?" "Because," she said, forcing her voice steady, "when the ground moves like that, it doesn't choose who falls." They didn't fully understand. She could see it in their puzzled faces, but they nodded anyway. Children in Bastion 3 learned early that survival was rarely clean. She stood, the crystal's faint throb echoing in her bones. The mountain felt different now, quieter, yes, but also watchful, as if it were waiting for her to call on it again. The voice that had once whispered so eagerly was silent, but she knew it wasn't gone. Days passed. The survivors rebuilt where they could, sealing off the dead sections and rerouting power. Rin returned to the mines. Her hands found their way back to the drill controls, the familiar vibration of metal biting into stone, grounding her in the ordinary. But it wasn't the same. Every strike of the drill reminded her of the quake she could summon with a thought. Every rumble in the distance made her tense, unsure if it was her imagination or the mountain answering some unspoken call. The others still watched her. Some smiled in passing. Others avoided her gaze entirely. Hero, threat, both labels clung to her in equal measure, and neither felt true. She wasn't sure what she was anymore. One shift, deep in an old shaft, she paused to rest her hand on the rock wall. The stone was cool, steady. She closed her eyes and listened. For a moment she thought she felt the crystal's rhythm sinking with the slow, patient heartbeat of the earth. It was not a command this time, not an urge to act, just a reminder. A reminder that power was still there, waiting. Her eyes opened. She pulled her hand back and returned to the drill. Wow! She would keep mining. She would keep working. And she would keep that last, dangerous step, the one that would turn her into the very thing she'd destroyed, locked away for as long as she could. But she knew, deep down, that if the ground ever stirred again and the voice whispered in her ear, she might not be able to tell whether it was the mountain or herself that answered. They called her the Quake Caller. The name traveled faster than the supply convoys, faster even than the rumors of new alien incursions. Across the scattered human outposts, clinging to survival in the ruins of former colonies, the story of Rin Solis was told in hushed voices, the woman who shook the earth until it swallowed an invading army whole. In some versions, she was a savior. In others, she was a warning, living proof that even salvation could leave deep fractures behind. The broadcast rarely mentioned the cost. They didn't talk about the 1/3 of Bastion 3 lost under falling stone, the families buried alongside the enemy. They didn't mention the long, cold stares from those who had survived but couldn't decide if they owed her gratitude or blame. The truth was more complicated than the myth, but myths had a way of sanding down the jagged edges. Rin ignored most of it. She spent her days back in the mines, hands on the controls of a drill, breathing in the dry, mineral-heavy air. She told herself it was because this was where she belonged, but deep down she knew it was because here, surrounded by stone, she could feel the mountain's heartbeat without anyone watching. The crystal inside her remained quiet, its once demanding rhythm now a faint throb she felt only when she stood still long enough. But she hadn't forgotten its voice. When the convoys from other outposts arrived, bringing news and barter goods, she'd sometimes overhear her own legends spilling from the mouths of traders who had never set foot on Bastion 3. They spoke of her as if she were more element than human, part of the rock, part of the quake, a force to be unleashed when all else failed. No one telling the story ever paused to ask if she wanted to be that. One evening, a visiting engineer from Farpoint Station caught her outside the repair bays. He was younger than her, his hands too clean to be a miner's. "You really did it, didn't you?" he asked, his voice half awe, half disbelief. She regarded him for a long moment. "I did something," she said finally. "But you saved your people." Her eyes drifted to the mountain's dark silhouette against the stars. "I saved some. That's not the same thing." He didn't seem to know how to answer that. Later, in the solitude of her quarters, he replayed his words in her mind. There was a part of her, a small, dangerous part, that wanted to believe him, to accept the role the stories had carved for her. But another part remembered the look in the eyes of the children when she'd told them the ground didn't choose who fell. She thought often about the choice she'd made, about the weight of it. The crystal hadn't forced her hand in that moment. Not exactly. It had been there, waiting, offering its strength, its terrible reach. But the decision to use it had been hers, and she knew that if the same moment came again, she couldn't be certain she'd choose differently. Once, standing in the stillness of an empty shaft, she murmured aloud, "Power isn't for holding everything. It's for choosing what's worth holding on to." Her voice echoed back from the walls, but the crystal stayed silent. It was a thought she would carry, a kind of creed. She repeated it to herself on the long shifts in the mine, in the quiet hours when the station lights dimmed to conserve power, in the dreams where the mountains spoke in the language of tremors. "If victory costs you yourself," she would whisper, "make sure what's left is worth living for." Weeks passed. Bastion 3's repairs advanced slowly. The dead were buried in the mountain's memory, their names etched into the bulkheads of the surviving halls. The alien threat seemed distant for the moment, but no one believed it was gone for good. Then, one cycle, the comms tower picked up a faint anomaly. It wasn't a signal in the usual sense, no transmission, no code. It was seismic, a reading that made no sense to the technicians until they double-checked the source coordinates. The disturbance wasn't on the planet at all. It was coming from the far edge of the system. Rin was in the mess hall when Varric found her. "We've got something," he said, sliding a tablet across the table. "Thought you should see it." She studied the data. The readings were faint but unmistakable, a rhythmic tremor pattern, impossible to detect without the right equipment, and one she felt more than she read. Each spike on the graph pulsed in her bones. "You feel it, don't you?" Varric asked quietly. She didn't look up. "Yes. You think it's them?" Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "No, not them. Something else." He didn't press her. He'd learned not to. Later, when the lights in the station dimmed for the night cycle, she walked alone to the deepest point of the mines, where the hum of machinery faded and only the stone remained. She knelt, pressing her palm flat to the ground. The crystal's pulse stirred, syncing with the distant rhythm. It was faint, far awake, but familiar in a way she couldn't put into words. The beat wasn't hostile, not yet, but it was deliberate, a hand knocking on a door only she could hear. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of it fill her. The weight of the mountains surrounded her, solid and patient. The cold air clung to her skin. Somewhere in the dark beyond the stars, something was calling. A slow smile touched her lips, not of joy, not of fear, but of recognition. When she finally stood, she whispered into the silence, "I hear you." And in the deep, slow language of stone, the earth seemed to whisper back,